Can you hear me? Good. Okay. Good morning, everybody. My name's Bokushu. It's great to sit with you this morning. And I've been walking around my neighborhood here in the village recently. Actually, I've been taking little walks throughout this pandemic period that we've been going through since March. And on these walks, I often pass a multiplex cinema on Broadway, and it has an electronic marquee that normally would have the coming attractions or the current shows that they'd be playing. But ever since March, that sign has said temporarily closed. So it's been almost a year. Feels like much longer than that to me. I don't know how it's been for you. But the sign keeps saying temporarily closed. And there are a lot of people who are waiting quite impatiently for this temporary situation to change. There are the people who sell or take the tickets in the theater or sell the concessions, who provide security, and everyone, of course, who makes, reviews, or just watches a movie. Dinner and a movie seems more and more like a pipe dream as the shadow of temporary grows ever longer. And while we wait for our cinemas to reopen, we can keep opening ourselves to the experience of our cinemas not being open. And we can ask, what is temporary? What isn't temporary? We have a lot of euphemisms in our language for temporary, for a limited period of time, for the time being, not permanent or impermanent, finite. When does temporary become permanent? When does finite become infinite? Is there a difference? Where does the change happen? Is this change a transformation, a realization? If our cinemas were open in New York City, we might glimpse the answer to these questions on our screens, maybe during the credits. But with all the cinemas temporarily closed, we need to look elsewhere for a portrayal of the truth. And if we take a good look at ourselves, which is always the best place to start, we might notice that temporary is a human invention born out of suffering. We can't accept that things are closed, that sacrifices must be made to prevent severe illness and save lives. So we put this label on the situation to make it seem more palatable. But the label is superfluous in two ways. First, everything is temporary. Change is continuous. So telling us that closure is temporary is telling us something akin to concrete is harder than dirt. Second, calling a closure temporary does not in any respect alter the fact that until something opens, it remains closed. And rather than opening ourselves to the closure, we keep stating and ignoring the obvious truth before our eyes. Maybe you think I'm making too much of this particular example, but our practice, which brought us here today, calls upon us to look at the finest details of our everyday experience to see all the ways we cause our own suffering. After all, how can you hope to address a problem when you don't even know it exists? Our practice and our suffering are inextricably bound together at a subatomic level. I know from my own personal experience that people are experts at creating problems for themselves. In the Book of Serenity, which Enkyo Roshi and Joshin Roshi have chosen as their text for the upcoming Path of the Koan class, we read, "People are deep and calm, essentially the same as saints, but because of dwelling in an evil society, it stains them and becomes a burden." That's a little dramatic and a little complicated, so I'll add a quote from Blaise Pascal, who put it much more simply. All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. We don't start out our lives this way. We have to be taught to construct an identity, and then we have to be taught how to build up and defend the identity that we've constructed, how to do the building and the defending that continue throughout most of our lives. And with those things, we're also taught that time exists and how to tell time. At some point in the remote past, I was told about the three hands of time. The big hand tells the minutes, the little hand tells the hours, and the skinny hand, moving much more rapidly, tells the seconds. The seconds make the minutes make the hours. We're taught that time is divided, exacting, and that it's limited. We're taught that our time is limited, that we are limited and separate beings. How is this hand limited? Is it the big hand? The small hand? Whose hand is it right now? Notice your own hands and notice whether there's any separation between this hand and your hands right now. Like everyone else listening to this talk, I was taught a vision of the world grounded in separation and not in relationship. And then for years and years, I had to hobble blindly along with my head up my ass until practice found me. Practice is still finding me right now. How does practice find me? One way it finds me is through Dogen's text Uji, which is our study text for this winter Ango. Uji is translated as the time being. What is this time being that Dogen's writing about? For me, this time being is not about temporary, nor is it about permanent. It is not about closed, nor is it about open. It is not one, it is not many. It neither has form, nor is it formless. The purpose of Uji seems to be to discuss time, and along with that, to discuss the relationship between time and all of existence. Right at the start of the text, Dogen says, "Time itself is being, and all being is time. Time itself is being, and all being is time. He's being very specific and very all-encompassing at the same time. And it sounds so straightforward, but it reveals nothing. Dogen clarifies things a little later when he says, the way the self arrays itself is the form of the entire world. The way the self arrays the self is all being, and being all being. The way the self arrays the self is time itself. I'm going to skip over what the nature of the self might be and work directly with what Dogen says here. The way that we array ourselves individually and collectively is all being, is all time. How do we array ourselves? Washing the dishes after a meal, sweeping the floor, taking out the garbage, sorting the recyclables, not going to cinemas, advocating for the release of aging prisoners and for the vaccination of prisoners who remain incarcerated. We array ourselves by donning 2 masks rather than 1. And we array ourselves in 100 billion other ways. Because we aren't separate from all being, because we aren't separate from the entire world. Uji is exploring the relationship between us and all of existence. A relationship that you could say takes the form of time. Because time has no form, the form of our relationship with all of existence is formless. And because our relationship with existence is formless, it takes many forms. The form of our relationship with the world, the form of time, is no gray hair. The form of time is lots of gray hair, and it is no hair. The form of time is a curved, twisted back. That form is an upright back. That form is not knowing the shape of your own back while sweeping a room. It is not knowing what a room is or what sweeping is while you sweep a room. Time also takes the form of not enough sleep and of oversleeping. Time is tears flowing into a mask, or a smile concealed behind a mask. Time is the interval it takes you to decide if what you're seeing is laughter or weeping behind one mask, behind 2 masks. Time is the beating of your heart. And when your heart stops beating, stopping is the form time will take. And at that time, tears may flow freely. In Uji, Dogen writes, so-called today flows into tomorrow. Today flows into yesterday. Yesterday flows into today, and today flows into today. Tomorrow flows into tomorrow, because flowing is a quality of time. Moments of past and present do not overlap or line up side by side. Time has no form. One might say it has no eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. Because time has a quality. and that quality is flowing. I remember a couple of summers ago at our last Obon ceremony, when my mother's ashes flowed through my fingers into the murky water of a stream. What wasn't flowing at that moment? How is that moment not flowing into this moment and the next moment? This moment is so-called today, flowing into today. Why does Dogen say so-called today? Zen Master Wang Bo said, "You people are all slurpers of dregs. If you travel like this, where will you have today? Do you know that in all China there are no teachers of Chan? My talk, these dregs that I have uncorked especially for you, are so-called today. By contrast, your own experience and realization are today. Your own realization and experience are how you actualize the time being. That is the form of the entire world today. The form of the entire world today contains 440,000 people in the United States and nearly 2 million others worldwide who have died of COVID-19 so far. Their illnesses and their deaths, many preventable, have been the challenging form the flow of time has taken over this year. And for those of us who have been left behind, deep sadness and anxiety have been the form that time has taken. As thousands continue to die with each passing day, and it's hard to believe, isn't it, that as we sit here so calmly, thousands are dying with each passing day. It is vital to remember that these forms of the pandemic time are not fixed. Whatever we might feel about our experience of the past year, we are flowing, not fixed. We are temporary, and our experience is temporary. Let's open ourselves fully to the temporary nature of this period in our lives. Impermanence is riding vigorously to our rescue. In his Genjokoan, Dogen writes, "Firewood becomes ash, and it does not become firewood again. Yet do not suppose that the ash is after and the firewood before. You should understand that firewood abides in the phenomenal expression of firewood, which fully includes before and after and is independent of before and after. Ash abides in the phenomenal expression of ash, which fully includes before and after. Just as firewood does not become firewood again after it is ash, you do not return to birth after death." To paraphrase Dogen, each of us abides in the phenomenal expression that is each moment of our lives, which fully includes before and after, and is independent of before and after. We burn through each moment like so much kindling. Our lives and expression complete this moment, and the extinction of that fire also in expression complete this moment. Dogen says in Uji, "Vigorously abiding in each moment is the time being. Do not mistakenly confuse it as non-being. Do not forcefully assert it as being." Dogen is reminding us emphatically to have today, to vigorously abide in each moment that is because that is how and where our lives find us. Dogen is cautioning us against nihilism on the one hand, and against building ourselves up and projecting our puffed up personalities on the other hand. In the United States, there aren't too many people engaging in the kind of nihilism that Dogen worried about. Unfortunately, and you can read it in the newspapers any old day, lots of people are driven to assert themselves and proclaim their beliefs as loudly and as grotesquely as possible. When someone forcefully asserts their version of reality, regardless of the underlying facts, they cause a great deal of suffering. Here, I'm going to give you just one instance of a very well-known person asserting his version of reality in a misguided manner. Quote, "The objective fact is I believe candidate X," I've taken the name out, it doesn't matter who the name is, "probably did actually carry Georgia." Let me read that again. The objective fact is I believe candidate X probably did actually carry Georgia. So just to clarify why I'm bringing this up, an objective fact has nothing to do with I believe. Probably has nothing to do with an objective fact. Forget the political content here and just focus on the practice content. This is the level of detail that we need to examine ourselves and our way of thinking at. We need to be able to dissect exactly how our mind works and clarify the difference between our own fantasies and objective reality. And if we can't do that, we're done for. And this culture and society are done for if facts become opinions, or vice versa. So just to make it operational, as a community and as individuals, we can use this time to recommit ourselves to practicing two skills that are increasingly rare. Knowing the difference between facts and opinions, and second, advocating our opinions without the rage and vitriol that have become so common in our public life. We can promote our viewpoints. We can advocate for our beliefs, but let's promote them as viewpoints, as beliefs, and not as the truth. And let's promote and advocate them in a measured and respectful fashion. What's called for in our public life is humility, not arrogant bluster. At just this time, we really can honor our lives as an instrument of peacemaking, as Ryotan Roshi urged us to do in his precepts talk on Thursday evening. And now, it is an objective fact that my time is up. So I ask you to consider, has this talk felt long? Has it felt short? Was it a waste of time? If it was a waste of time, whose time was wasted? Whatever your thoughts about this so-called talk, you can't say that it has ever been anything other than temporary. In his continuing practice, Dogen writes, "Think quietly. Life does not last long." And he adds, "This life of one day is a life to rejoice in. Because of this, even though you live for just one day, if you can be awakened to the truth, That one day is vastly superior to an eternal life. If this one day in the lifetime of 100 years is lost, will you ever get your hands on it again? Let's practice wholeheartedly. Let's use this temporary time to really look deeply in ourselves and learn the truth of impermanence, the truth of our world as it expresses itself directly through each of us in each moment of time. Thank you.